Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan, this is Super Review, and this is the Ziigaat Cross Jay Estrella. It's a new hybrid IM that is a collaboration between the brand Ziigaat and fellow IM reviewer Jay. And I'll be honest up front, I was actually a little bit hesitant to do this review just because, well, Jay didn't really take feedback about an IM that he didn't make very well. Talking about the Ziigaat thing, but it was sent to me, so let's take a look at the Estrella, which is a $300 hybrid IM. It's got two dynamic drivers, 4 balanced armatures, and coming in at, I think I already said it, $300. Basically the same price as things like the Dunu Da Vinci, similar price to Moondrop Blessing. So that's kind of the area that we're talking about. Although tuning wise, this is quite different, and we'll talk about that exactly. But I guess a quick shout out to Linsoul Audio for sending in the Estrella for review. If you want to check out the Estrella, anything else they've got, I've got them linked in the description down below. But with that out of the way, let's dive to the table and start talking about the physical form factor, what you get inside the box, and then we'll talk about the tuning, the sound quality, and then I'll give this thing a final score. So here's your packaging for the Estrella. Nice, simple packaging. You don't get a ton in the box for $300. Maybe you would want more, but to be honest, this is as much as I need. You get a set of tips, silicone tips to be exact. And I guess the only things I will say about these silicone tips is 2 points. One, they're a little bit on the long side, which maybe comes across, maybe doesn't. But the other thing is that they're not really, they're a little bit large, right? The smallest one is kind of equivalent to a medium and a lot of other ear tips. So just keep that in mind. And this nozzle, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is a little bit on the long side itself. So having these longer ear tips, I actually found was not ideal for me. Hence, I'm not using them. But apart from that, they're perfectly fine ear tips. You do also get one set of foam ear tips, but personally, not a big fan of the foamies, so we put them to the side. Apart from that stuff, you do get a carry case, and I actually like this carry case. It's a nice size. It's got a semi-hard shell, a zipper all around. Now, this is a little bit too large to put in a pocket, but kind of just perfect size to throw in a bag. I like this. A lot of IMs just come with way too bulky a case. Ziigaat, you're doing it right. But that's going to bring us to talking about the IM itself. And let's start by describing this cable, which is a pretty decent cable. It's a little bit on the thin side, maybe a little bit on the kink prone side, but it's a little bit on the stiff side. But generally behavior is actually quite nice. I like that it's thin and lightweight. I dig that much about it. And it's also got nice small hardware. The one thing that I will complain about in terms of functionality is just this chin slider. It does have a chin slider, which I appreciate. It's pretty loose, doesn't really stay in place. So yeah, I don't know, just expect that if you are a chin slider person, expect to have to reposition that every time you fit it. Apart from that, okay, well, you've got your preformed ear hooks up top. I'll show you those. Maybe a little bit unattractive, just the way that they've done it, but then you've got your standard 2-pin connector. So if you want to swap this with another cable, you should have no problems. Now, maybe I'll just highlight here that the 2-pin connector is not recessed, so really should work with just about any 2-pin connector IM or cable out there. But that's going to bring us to talking about the earpieces now. And let's see, where should we start? Aesthetically, I don't know. It's kind of generic looking, but it's not bad looking. I guess mostly I just don't really love the Ziigaat logo. Maybe I just don't really love the Ziigaat name. Not totally sure how I'm supposed to pronounce it, but there is the logo there twice. In fact, is that 2 different sizes, or is that just, it looks, I think that might be 2 different sizes. That's interesting. Now, I will be thankful that there's no like cringe sunglasses or anything on here, but aesthetically wise, this is just kind of, you know, it's a run-of-the-mill IM, which is not bad. I actually didn't notice until I got this under light that it's all glittered all the way around. Very fancy. But the shell itself is a nice shape. I'll show you what it looks like in my ear. The one thing that I will highlight as I've got it here up on the table is, again, like I mentioned, the nozzle is slightly on the long side. It's not going to look particularly long here. It's just when you've got this kind of thicker body with this nozzle sticking out plus the longer ear tips, that's where I found that going with a shorter ear tip like the one I've got on here worked better for my particular ear. And I guess while we're talking about my particular ear, let's take a look at it. So here's how the Estrella fits inside my ear. Again, like I mentioned, generally a pretty well-fitting IM. Size-wise, I would say this is like squarely a medium-fitting IM. It's got some molding to it, so it locks in place. And once it's there, it's actually really secure. If you are concerned about fit stability and stuff like that, I think they've done a really good job. The one thing that I am very aware of right now as I'm pressing on this thing is that there is pretty significant driver flex on this, unfortunately, which just means that as I'm pressing this into my ears, I hear this like popping and crinkling, and it's not super pleasant. Now, it's not a thing that you have to worry about once you've got it fitted. If I'm just sitting around listening to music, it's not a problem for me. If I'm chewing gum or whatever, not a problem for me. It really is just something that comes into play when you are fitting the IM in, and you get that little pressure buildup, and it makes kind of a bad sound, which I'm not a big fan of, but I've heard worse and much more expensive IEMs, if I'm honest. Okay, so that is the physical form factor. Let me roadie wrap this together, and I guess as I'm doing that, you'll see, you know, just how compliant this cable is, and it's generally a nicely compliant cable. But now let's talk about the sound, the tuning here of this IM. Ooh, move that stuff out of the way. Make room for my finger. So this is a frequency response of the Ziigaat Cross Jay Estrella. If you want to check this thing out, I've got it linked in link in the description down below, but we can also just take a look at it right here. And what you should see is a tuning that is very much inspired by Harman, although it's got some editorialization to it, okay? Obviously, you've got a lot of bass down here. You've got a little bit of excess energy here in the kind of lower treble region, these are kind of both characteristics of Harman. Although the thing that's a little bit different from Harman is that where this bass boost is it comes in a little bit earlier. And because of that, this thing's quite a bit bassier than Harman. You do also get quite a bit more upper treble versus your typical Harman tune. And that in combination with this excess treble, I find just kind of generally gives this a very V-shaped sound signature. It's kind of clean in the mid-range, right? So it's nice and clean. You do get quite a bit of vocal energy, which comes in from this area, but still nonetheless, I would describe this as generally an exciting V-shaped sound signature. Now, to my ear, how does that sound? And let me pull up my notes just to make sure I don't miss anything. Well, actually, you know what? Let's start with the bad stuff, okay? Because there is some good stuff, but let's start with the bad stuff. That tuning that I described, that V-shaped tuning, it just gives it kind of a contrasty and artificial sound to it, all right? The timbre, right? If you're listening to strictly electronic music, I don't know what's electronic music. If you're just listening to strictly electronic genres or music that happens to use a lot of electronic music in it, it's not going to be so much an issue. But if you're listening to a lot of stuff that has like, you know, nuanced vocal content or just more analog instruments, I think that this tuning is just going to be a little bit too much, a little bit overcooked. The word I wrote down here is deep fried. It's very aggressive in its tuning. It's basically taking kind of like a Harman tune, and it's really just kind of turned it up to the point that it's very contrasty. It's a bit much. The treble, initially it's like not especially sharp or sibilant or anything like that. It's just kind of hot. And the more that I listen to this IM, the more it just kind of becomes a little bit fatiguing and wears out its welcome a little bit. Now the bass is very bassy on this guy. Not so much in like a warm, domineering, bloaty bass. The bass is actually pretty well controlled, and it's got a nice bounce to it. It's got a nice physicality to it. Actually, kind of stand out, to be honest. But it is a lot of it, and it also just kind of feels a little bit artificial the way that it's tuned or kind of integrated with the rest of that sound. I think most of that artificialness, honestly, is probably coming from the top end, which again I just kind of describe as a little bit overcooked. But it does have the effect of making the bass just kind of sound a little bit rubbery in its bounce. Again, can be kind of exciting. The positive side of this thing is that you do get a lot of bass and you still get a nice clean sound signature. So if you're looking for that really strong sense of separation between instruments, but you still want to have a lot of bass, sometimes that's a trade-off you have to make. The Estrella does a good job of giving you a lot of bass, a lot of physicality in that bass, but not compromising on the distinction and separation between sounds. And I think another side effect of the way this thing is tuned is you just get really strong imaging, right? The sense of, again, separation, the positioning, it gives you a good sense of space. It just really is kind of that sense of contrastiness that I find a little bit overdone and kind of limits my enjoyment of this IM, but I guess is going to lead us into my conclusion of the Ziigaat Cross Jay Estrella. $300, there's a lot of stuff at this price range that you could be considering. You could be considering something like the Dunu Cross Giz Audio Oh my gosh, the Da Vinci. Honestly, I would go even lower. I think the $200 Chopin, to me, is just kind of like a more mature version of what this thing is going for. Now, if you're looking for that exciting, just bombastic type sound, you might actually prefer the Estrella. But for me, I find it a little bit overcooked. You know, it's certainly not a bad IM. I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. If you want to check it out, I've got it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell. I'll catch you on the next super review.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit. Let's get with the fish.